the way I'll word it in this case is like, I've tried basketball, I've tried soccer, I've tried like sports. I'm not saying like that's a little bit too strong of a laugh there, Lily. No, no, but like
No,
I,
but I identify a little bit because I,
Welcome to another episode of Tobin Tonight, here with Lily Vakili. Did I say it right?
You did.
Perfect. One for one. It was so nice to have you on. See it. No. Lily, we're going to go all over this place in this conversation, but I really want to ask you, because it was kind of interesting, that were you born in Honduras?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so if someone told me to find it on a map, I'm gonna basically, there's gonna be a crowd like, why did he start off this way? I wouldn't know where to find that on a map. But I read that, like, when you were born, your father basically had to step over. It was like a military during a time of a military coup, and he said they like stepped over.
There was a fair amount
Yeah.
of political instability in Honduras at that time, and frankly, there's been a fair amount generally in
Yeah.
Honduras. But at the time, there was a lot of political upheaval, and in order to get to my mother in the hospital, he had to kind of go through a lot of it was I won't go into gory details, but
Yeah.
but he did say that probably had something to do with my overall personality.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just interested, like, and how so? Like, how would you describe your personality?
Oh, that's difficult.
Like, oh, your personality is difficult? No, I'm only kidding.
Well, some would say yes, but anyway, because it's kind of like beauty in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, what's your
Okay.
personality? I think that, I am told that all kinds of things. I don't know how to answer that question. No one has ever asked me, what's your personality?
See, this is what you get on these Tobin
I
Tonights.
know, this is a good question.
It's a good start. I was actually going to make fun of myself and say, yeah, this is like when you had a sports athlete, and then like the reporter's like, so like, how would you rate yourself in the room? It's like, it's a room. I get along with people fine. I don't get along with Keith, but me and Keith understand why we don't get along. And he's like, elaborate on that. Why don't you get along with Keith? Simple. I'm more laid back. He's more strict. That's it. And then they're like, right up that they don't get along. It's like, he
I will
explained
tell you
that.
what, I like talking to people for sure. I'm curious about people. So, like even, when the publicist and she was like, hey, would you want to do this? And I looked you up and I was, just listening to some of your interviews and stuff. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, this guy's interesting, and he clearly is curious about people as well. And he's, so I just kind of feel like, engage with the world, right?
There you go. That's a nice way to look at it. I want to ask you too, like, how did you go from, because obviously you go from Honduras to other places. Like, when did that come about? Because I find it interesting. Like, sometimes if you interview a military family, they just move about all the time.
Yeah.
But like, how did it come from going to, say, Honduras to Florida, New Jersey, all over the map?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not unlike quote unquote military brats, right? People will often assume that I came from a military family. And the fact is, we did, a good part of our lives was spent around military and military families, but it was just because that's where kind of like where schools were located and such. But so like in Puerto Rico, I attended an Air Force Base school up at Ramey Air Force Base. Woo! But the reason we moved around is because my dad is a geneticist and actually a plant pathologist. So he studies disease in plants, and particularly in tropical plants. So he moved around a lot because of that. And, he and my mother loved the idea of traveling, and, came from I have a big family. So 5 out of 6 kids, number 5. And, my mother, being the intrepid woman that she was willing to kind of like, load us up and, take us all over the world.
Nice. Now you said you were the fifth of 6, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have 2 older brothers. I'm the youngest, but, like, 5? Having, like
Mm.
if you have 5 of 6, like
2
so
older
you're not
sisters,
yeah,
2 older brothers,
yeah.
1
So
younger
you're
brother.
not, like, the youngest, but I feel like it's safe to say you're probably like, when it comes to the pecking order,
I'm
it's
the baby
yeah.
girl,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I have my little brother to pick on, right?
Yeah. So it's almost like you have one where all the rest of them, range of like, well, if I don't feel like picking on her today, I can pick on her, I can pick on her. You're like, I only get to pick on one.
That's the way it rolls, in the family order, right?
Yeah. I got to pick on nobody. I I had
I
to
know,
wait.
but you were probably also adored, right? Because
Yeah.
like, we're the
Oh,
baby of the family.
yeah. Don't worry. I'm like 30 now, but I have older brothers that were just like, man, we couldn't get away with anything. And then you come along and you get away with everything. I'm like, dude, you realize that's not on me. That's like whoever came after me, if there was another one, would have gotten away with stuff that,
That is the
yeah, that
benefit,
that
though.
is
Like,
it. Like,
yeah,
you know,
you do have to deal with the older siblings and doing everything they tell you to do and all that. But I think, yes, your parents are so exhausted by the time the last one comes along, they're just like, "Oh, yeah, do whatever. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's fine."
But I want to ask you, like, now with having that kind of big of a family, like, how did you adjust to moving? Was it family kind of more or less your friends at this point, or did you make friends? Was it harder to make friends because of the whole moving around?
I mean,
So I
you
didn't
know,
have friends. I was a loner.
I never had friends. Um, I mean, I had my siblings, right? And so that was a lot of it. And you just kind of adjust to where you go, right? And you learn to pay attention and observe and figure out how to, fit in enough
Yeah.
so you don't get beaten up or something. I mean, and I think a lot of it was that my parents just treated it like, look, you get this opportunity to go to this new place. And so part of it was in their attitude, right? I kind of saw that they embraced whatever culture or environment we were in. And that was the role model that I had. So, it was hard to leave friends for sure.
Yeah.
That's tough for any kid.
That's
But,
fair.
but, it was all right.
I think like musicians kind of get that label of like, at least I feel like 80s musicians sometimes do, where it's almost like, oh yeah, it's like my family was like from a broken home and I got into drugs early and now I became a rock and roll star. I'm like, okay. And then you get the 90s ones that were like, well, my parents were fine, but like my life wasn't fine. I was like, all right, both of you have good music. What's your problem? And then like today's, it's just like, I came from Disney. It's like, great, like cool.
Hey,
But
as long as the music is good, you
yeah,
know?
that's fair. I'm not dissing Disney. I mean, there's plenty of people that came out that started in Disney that
That's
aren't
true.
Disney now, and then people are like, "How dare they, go against Mickey Mouse?" I'm like, okay, number one, Mickey Mouse is not real.
Wasn't Justin Timberlake, like
Yeah, they had like so the Mickey. It's funny because it was a little bit before my time, but I remember
Mhm.
Mickey Mouse Club as being Timberlake, Aguilera, Britney Spears. I think Jessica Simpson didn't make the
Wow.
cut, but she was like
Oh,
in there, and I'm like, that's kind of funny to think that this person becomes famous and didn't
yeah.
make the cut, right? It's like in Living Color when you look at like Jim Carrey, you're like, how did you not make SNL? It's like, well, he did.
J-Lo
Yeah,
was on Living Color. It's one of the
yeah,
dancers.
yeah. It's just crazy to look back and be like, all right, so you didn't make this, but you still found a way, and that's or I guess a little bit of determination, a little bit of drive, which is
A
good.
little bit of luck.
A little
You
bit
know?
of luck, yeah. I want to ask you when it comes to all three of those things, what got you into the music side of things? Because like you got a lot of alleys and avenues that you went up, but what drove you to the music side?
Uh, I mean, I'm very musically oriented, love music. Music was a big part of my family life. They're always listening to, just this wide range of musical styles and performers. And so that always kind of captured my interest. But I didn't think of myself as a musician. I didn't think of myself as a singer or, a guitarist. I picked up a guitar from my sister after she left for college. And, I kind of taught myself. It's all self taught, mainly chords. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And um, it was I went into theater. I did a lot of different things. I became a lawyer. Now the consistent thing was I kept writing. I kept writing poems. And eventually I picked my guitar back up. And this kind of relates to some of the disability advocacy work that I became involved in. Um, and the guitar became something, and starting to make music became very I was really just doing it for myself and for my family. It was a source of comfort, a source of companionship, if you will. And the more I did it, and the more I started to work with other people, and specifically like with Ben St. Jack, who's the guitarist, we met and started working together 10 years ago.
Okay. Wow.
And we just built this relationship. And the more I did, the more I enjoyed it. And it just felt like it was this fantastic um, release and source of solace and comfort and joy.
Okay.
And I decided to pursue it.
So like I know there's other things that you kind of dabbled in as well from just looking like briefly at a profile here, but like obviously music was the one that drove, like you had a lot of interest in and drove
Yeah.
towards, but like was there just, because the way I'll word it in this case is like, I've tried basketball, I've tried soccer, I've tried like sports. I'm not saying like that's a little bit too strong of a laugh there, Lily. No, no, but like
No,
I,
but I identify a little bit because
yeah, but I was just like, I don't know why, don't know how. I just enjoyed bowling, and then there's people out there that will
cool.
like what, and I'm just like, I think it's like when you're a kid and like I
Bowling's
look at it
really
now as
fun.
like
Are
I
you
look at
good at it?
yeah, it's funny
Wow.
because like
I
I
am
look at
not good at it, but I
it.
like playing it.
I look at it like when you're older, like I guess if you're a parent, like now,
Mhm.
like just say you're in your 30s, it's like what's the easiest way to have a kid's party without getting too wild? Take them to bowling. And I'm like, that makes sense. So I think that's it.
But
A lot of
have you ever slid? Have you ever slid down the
oh
alley
yeah.
and right.
I've
I
I
always imagine like
yeah.
some kid is gonna go right in there with the pins.
My biggest thing is I was very animated. I liked comedy. So like you'd have parents watching you, and like I treated it because I had two older brothers in hockey. So I treated it the same as hockey.
Yeah.
Not a good idea, because
Yeah.
in hockey, like you could like, yell and punch someone in the face and someone would just be like, "Yeah, that's my
Not
kid."
in bowling. No,
Yeah,
no,
in
not
bowling, I would be like, "You didn't get a strike." And I would like stamp my foot and look at my mom, and my mom would just be like, "Not mine." Like, like you're embarrassing me. And I'm just
I
like,
know
they're
who this
not all
child
going
is.
down. Yeah.
Someone help me.
Yeah. They're not all going down. And then she just like, keep your arm straight. And I'm just like, okay, two things. My arm is not going straight. So you either have to adapt with me, or you basically have to tell me what else I'm doing. And she's like,
Now,
I
did you
can't help
start
you.
with the bumpers up and all that business? And
Oh yeah, we started with that, and then it was just easy. But I think sometimes that creates an illusion in your mind where it's like, I'm always gonna have the bumpers, man. It's like,
I
no, you're not. So get
It's
used
like,
to throwing
it's
it.
never gonna go into the gutter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I only realized, so it's like a funny story, but I only realized the other day when I'm playing Mario Kart with my friends, I've had the bumpers up. So like I've been cheating the whole system, and I didn't even realize. So I was like, man, I'm missing the ramps. How come you guys are hitting the ramps? It's like, well, do you have the bumpers on? And I was like, no, there's nothing stopping me from falling off. And it's like, okay,
Oh,
but Brian, if you go towards the side, does your car kind of automatically? And I'm like, yes, it does. It's like,
yeah.
you got the bumpers on. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
You know what? I've got to check because my son loves playing Mario Kart. And
Yeah.
I never noticed the bumpers.
Yeah, it's if you see on the back of the car, it's an
Uh-huh.
antenna.
It's
It's
the
ba-
antenna?
yeah, if there's an antenna on the back of your car, He has the bumpers
Bumpers.
up. I didn't even know. Like
Oh my
we
god.
played with
I mean,
we
I have
played
no
with
idea. This has been years that he's been playing this
this is
game.
brand new information.
It's brand new.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be distracted for the rest of this
Oh,
interview. I need
good.
to know.
I'm just gonna be talking, and you're just gonna be sitting there, and then like in the back of your mind, it's like I didn't understand they had the
Bumpers.
bumpers up, and you just hear me go like Lily, Lily, and you'll be like
Really?
bumpers. Yeah. uh, but like no, I did think it's interesting because yeah, I got interested in bowling, and then I've tried different things, and then I don't know why I just really like public speaking because it was like kind of like again the comedian side is you have
Yeah.
people drawn towards you,
Yep.
and for like I don't know, say 5 minutes of the time that you're doing a speech, they're attracted to you. They're listening to what you're saying. You have that power where everything else is like a bit of a team sport. I'm not saying I'm not a team player. It's just that I like to make people laugh. So if somehow I leave and someone laughs for like 2 seconds, I'm like, mission accomplished, man. Did
Yeah.
that great. But
Yeah.
bowling, it's like I can hit a strike and someone be like, the next person comes up and hits a strike too. I'm like, there goes my fame. Right. So at least with comedy or like, public speaking, you could like hit a perfect punchline or say something like, that's going to stick with me for a while. And they're like,
It's
good.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
You make people laugh. I mean, they remember it, right?
Yeah.
You make people feel good, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a diversion and it's a shared kind of thing. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so with music, when you said it was more or less like of a comfort for you or something that kind of, I guess, you got interested in, and it was comforting. Like, did you find that kind of similar with music to you? Like, if you have an audience, they engaged in the music and you were like, all right, it's kind of like oddly putting, but like a drug where you're kind of like, all right, the audience is feeding off me, and
Yeah.
this is kind of giving me like a high. And that was
Oh,
those aren't
totally.
my words; those are Colin Mockery's words. Colin Mockery said the same thing about comedy. So,
Totally. I mean, I think anyone who does this experiences, right? So that's why, performing live is so fantastic. I mean, it's of course sometimes it doesn't work, right? I guess just like in comedy, right? You can
yeah,
blow the line or whatever. You're testing something. What I like about performing live is that when it works, one, it means that you've really connected. You've connected with people, even if it's two people in the room,
yeah,
which we've played to before. Um, you connect and the band connects, and it's just this incredibly exhilarating feeling. You just feel extremely present. Your mind is completely, your whole being is focused on the thing at hand, not distracted, worrying about this or that, or, it's
yeah.
all encompassing in the moment that you are performing. And that's really incredible.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you bring up live shows, like obviously with the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of live shows, if any. But you do kind of miss those aspects. Like I feel like people kind of adjusted after a
Yeah.
while, but like yeah, like if you're the artist, you're probably like, can we do some live shows? I've got songs that I want to perform live so people can see the difference between a live version and like
Oh god, yeah.
I give credit to some acts that I know when I was younger, I was in the boy and girl bands, and I'm sure
Mhm.
they can do great performances, but it's like I will always come back to like I think it's like Oasis. They did like obviously when they're in their own country, they amp it up way more. But there was I think one time at Wembley that they were
Mhm.
performing,
Mhm.
and the way that crowd attached to Wonderwall. Now I know it's like oh yeah, Wonderwall of course, but like
Mhm.
I was just like man, if I was alive during that time or like capable of traveling, I would want to be there because they just like I don't even think the band got a word out. They just took it right from them.
Yeah.
And some bands
Totally.
like it, some bands don't.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where I think I've seen one where John Mayer was in LA and I was
Mhm.
looking up on YouTube and he just does a cover of I think it's like a Tom Petty song. And I'm
Ah,
like, all right, that's a high bar. Let's see how it goes. And he
correct.
and he does it so good.
Well,
And I
I would
was
expect that John Mayers would. You bring up a
yeah,
good point because I am very leery of, doing covers
yeah,
because just for that reason, it's like if you're going to cover a Tom Petty song, a Prince song,
yeah,
fill in the blank song, Springsteen, you've got to make it your own.
But
You
you gotta
both
still
have,
do a good job.
yeah, yeah, and it's very, very tricky. So generally speaking, I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Someone's already done that really well. Why
Yeah.
don't I just do my song?
Yeah. I just find it interesting because like there's some songs that I like that I'm sure if you to not be as biased that some people like I didn't like that at all. Like I'm a big Rascal Flatts fan, but
Oh,
and then
okay.
there's I think they did a song for Cars and it could
Mhm,
be I think it was like
mhm.
maybe a Tom Cochran song or like Life is a
Right.
Highway.
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah, of course, of
and
course.
then I like it, but then there are people like
It's a
co-
great raucous tune. Are you
yeah,
kidding me? If you can't get up and, like, dance to that.
yeah, like now everyone has their own different distinctive style. Like
Yeah,
Cochran's is good, but to me, I grew up in the Rascal Flatts era where I'm just like, man, that guy's voice like is just so distinctive.
it
So I
is.
like that one. And then
Yeah.
they have another one that they did a cover of. I think it's like a Halls and Oates song.
Oh,
And
wow.
I like that one too because it's a little bit more country based. Now some people get mad where it's like
Which one, do you remember what it was?
I think it's I'm gonna date myself. It's maybe like it's like you make my dreams come true. I
Mhm.
can't remember the I don't
I
know if
think
that's
there's,
the
like,
title.
some, yeah, new interest, like, in Hall& and Oates and some of their music because, they're just such fantastic
Well,
songwriters and
we get it from the Toronto Maple Leafs, like watching the NHL game when they win. That's the song they play. So I mean,
Okay,
it's
alright.
interesting. I think it's interesting because you raise a good point because there's a generation of young kids out there now that listen like that watch Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and then when they win, they're like, okay, I like when the Leafs win. Now I
Uh-huh.
hear that song every time they win.
That
What is that
song.
song? And then
Right.
that's how you get into like Hall Notes.
Yeah.
Like, I originally got into like Garth Brooks because my parents like watching country music and
Yeah.
Alan Jackson. And I was just like, all
Mhm.
right. And then I'll play that. And then my niece is like, who is this person? Where's Luke Combs? Where's Luke Bryan? I'm like, all right, but you realize that Luke Combs probably listens to Garth Brooks. And like, so it goes back, but
It does,
it,
but that's what's so great about music, right? I mean,
yeah,
people can talk about, oh, well, that's, it's whatever generation, da 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 da. But the fact is, people listen to music across all
yeah,
kinds of, you know, age, everything. There's just so much out there. And that if you're listening, if you're willing to try new stuff, you just pick up on it, right? Whether it's jazz influenced, right? Whether it's a blues, tune, whether it's, a classical piece that you hadn't heard before, string orchestra. Uh, you know, it's all information, right? It might not be the thing that you listen to,
yeah,
when you're making dinner or whatever, but it might not be the band that you go to see and
yeah.
party down to, but it's interesting. I mean, I'm just always kind of listening to new stuff.
I think it's interesting because sometimes artists will see a cover of that of like their song, and then they'll be like they'll either like it or they'll comment, which goes a long way for that artist because obviously they grew up listening to you, and
Yeah.
this is how they got into it. But I find some artists will just be like, all right, I seen it, but I don't want to comment and give them attention. And like I'm like, all right, that's kind of shitty. If I'm the artist, I'm like, it makes you look good if you kind of give them a
Hey,
shout out
it's
for covering
flattery,
it.
it's
Yeah.
flattery. Come on, someone has decided that your music is something. I mean, I'd be
Yeah.
thrilled if someone covered my music, I'm living for the day, man.
Yeah,
I'm living
yeah.
for the day.
Someone will come on my podcast one day and just be like, "Man, like that Lily girl, like she did a really," and I'd be like, "It's funny, we interviewed her," and it's like, "No way!" I'd be like, "Hold on, let me find the contact. You can," but it's like, hey, listen, if she doesn't like it or retweet it, don't take it personally. Like, we discussed this.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
still sticking to the music side of things.
Yes.
I want to ask you, like, tell me a little bit about your new album for people who don't know about it and the kind of music that you play, because again we're looking at an audience that are probably looking at you for the first time here and going like, I'm interested, but she has to sell me on why I have to go to iTunes and download it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we're really freaking good. What can I say? But it's original. It's original rock and roll. It's some very, here's what would have sold me on me, like if I didn't know. So someone recently said, she was like, oh, listen to the band, listen to our new album, which is Walking Sideways, which is, kind of like my joke about how I get places. I never take the straight road. I'm always like, how did I get here? Well, walking sideways. But she was like, she listened to the album. She's like, it's a little bit like, she's like, yeah, they're like the Ramones, the Pretenders, the Stooges,
Nice.
and kind of like Meatloaf too. And I was like, that's hilarious. And I loved it because it kind of captures the band's vibe, which is it's very much kind of this rock and roll with kind of a punk element to it, but there's a lot of social commentary and there's a lot of humor. And
Okay.
so we write about I write about and the band kind of we come together and we build these songs out together, and it's just it's a huge joy. I mean, we get to kind of tell stories, tell them in a way that gets people either dancing or just, bobbing their heads. Um, or gives them something to think about, but in a way that kind of gives them a little earworm, you know. So yeah, check it out. I'm thrilled with what we're hearing from people who didn't know us and kind of the associations that they're making.
Yeah.
And we just got to keep proving ourselves live because that's a high bar. The Pretenders, Stooges, Ramones, and Meatloaf. I'm like, oh, all
Yeah.
right, guys, let's rehearse.
Yeah, yeah. That's the bar that we like someone else set for us. Thank you. Now
I
we
know.
have to live up to that
Now
bar.
we have to live
Thanks.
up to it.
Yeah.
But we love playing live. We love the energy and we love kind of the edginess of just being there on a stage. Hopefully, you're in we play all kinds of venues, and some of the most exciting ones are the ones where the audience is right there in front of you. Because I tell you what, that is
Yeah.
there's no filter.
I want to ask you too, kind of getting outside the music side of the box.
Mhm.
Like what made you become more or less of a lawyer? Because out of all things, I feel like that should be almost like an NBC show where it's like Lily's a lawyer by day, and then by night she's performing in a band, and then it's like, wait, is this on NBC or is this on Disney? I'd be like, doesn't
I know.
matter.
Hey, someone write that script.
Yeah.
Um,
Her
so
power as a lawyer is to rock on.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I know that to me, of course, it does not seem so strange. It's just my life.
Yeah.
I've pursued the things that interested me. I've had opportunities at certain times and I've tried to take advantage of them. I've always loved language and have been interested in the impact of words. What do they mean? How are they used? And that applies to music as well, of course. And I started off actually in theater. And of course, it applies to theater.
Yeah.
So to me, I was in terms of law. I was very curious about the rules or the norms that people establish for themselves. And a lot of them are very aspirational, and aren't met. But our rights, whether it's to speak freely, whether to not suffer from oppression from the state, those things come from words that are then acted on, in the context of whether it's protest or law or right. I think people are inherently aspirational. They wish for things. And one of the ways that they express those aspirations, right, is through language and words. And so I've always, that to me is the through line. And of course, I practice law, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I find it fascinating, right? Because to me, most people I know, they don't kind of pigeonhole themselves and say they're kind of one thing. Everybody is a complex human being and they have a lot of different aspects to themselves.
That's
So,
fair.
I'm kind of cool with it.
So like when you were going to, I obviously like you went to school for law,
Mhm.
but like, what was there ever like kind of this idea of, because I know sometimes with law, like you got to meet bars, you got to pass certain tests, you got to have certain grades. Was there ever like this kind of side point when you're in university or college and you're like, maybe I'll take a different path, or was it just always kind of, I'm interested in it, I'm going to get it? Because the
Mhm.
reason I bring that up is I always felt like I wanted to be a journalist, but
Mhm.
as soon as I started getting into the nitty gritty of like going to university, now I'm not saying oh yeah every day was a party, but I was just more or less going, all right, I'm watching kids that I want to be in the same class at, because I originally got into media studies because I wanted to do film,
Yeah.
and then I was like, all right, I didn't ever get to hold a camera in university, and I was like, all right, bad move. I should have went to a college where it's a little bit more hands on. But
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm in it to win it at this point. So
Mhm.
the guy was like, well, if you do well, you can transfer over into journalism. I was like, great. So I got to meet some of these kids through the course I was taking,
Yeah.
and I would ask them maybe like on a daily basis, like, hey, we're done class today. Like, do you want to just go to like the pub? Do you want to just watch a game? And they're like, no, man, I got to work on a newspaper story. I got to do this. I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna go play hockey with some of the neighbor kids. So, like, if you want to join, but I didn't understand that they were so stressed out on making this average where it was like they had to do the school newspaper, they had to do this,
Mhm.
this, and if they got a 75, that was still kind of borderline. But if a kid got an 85, but he wasn't involved in the newspaper, this and this, he wasn't getting advanced. So it's almost like the more you were in,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
kind of, and
yeah.
I was just like, that is not a way that I want to
Yeah.
live. I was like, I want to have fun, but I want
Right.
to learn.
Yeah.
So that's why I ended up doing communications, because you could still branch into different aspects. So I guess in a long way of getting around to it, but like, was that like your idea with law? Was there ever a second kind of way of going like, maybe I'm not going to take law, I like this, but law kind of overtook that in a way?
No, I mean, it's not like I had some plan, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
I was, it I've always enjoyed studying and being very focused on
Oh,
things.
you're one of those people. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
No, no, no.
yeah, yeah, that's why I've got the glasses to prove it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's
Um, when I something interests me, I do hone in on it.
okay.
And so, and I look, I was surrounded by people who were just some people who were just brilliant. That was the other thing. I loved being around people who were I was learning from.
Yeah,
You know, I felt like I had the benefit of being in these classrooms and listening to some of these people talk and thinking about how they were, thinking about judicial philosophy and rights and, the role of law and pursuing social justice and using law to pursue social justice. These things were just fascinating to me to have access to. So it's not like I was the best student or anything like that. It's not like I was just, hitting all the marks this way and that,
yeah,
but I was sure benefiting from the intelligence of the people around me.
yeah. I mean, that's fair. I just think it's interesting because, like I said, it's sometimes like when you find out what people get interested in or what field they chose, like obviously there's the bias side of you of saying like, oh, I'd never do that. That's not interesting to me. It's like, all right, then there's people out there that be like, how can you interview people? How do you have conversations with people? Don't you find that boring? I'm like, no. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's what interests me. So like, you kind of have to put that into perspective at times where it's like, all right, take your interest for this, but now apply to what and then you're like, oh
Yeah.
wow, if they feel that intensely the same way I do about that, then it's great, because I don't want to be like in a world where someone's like, yeah, I became a doctor, I hate it. I'd be like, okay. It's like
I mean,
that's
some people do feel that way. I'm sorry they do, but
yeah,
I mean, if you have the wherewithal and you've had the resources and support and what have you, and determination and other things, right? There's a lot that goes into it to be able to do something that you enjoy, that you love.
yeah,
Uh, that's a tremendous privilege, right? And, so, I'm incredibly grateful that I can do all of these things that that interest me, that just engage me, and that allow me to kind of build relationships with other people that I find really meaningful and productive.
Now, you are an advocate for, autism disability. I want to ask you, like, because you have a child with autism, correct?
Yes, an adult son at this point. Yes.
Okay, an adult son. Okay, so
Mhm.
it's almost like me. I consider myself an adult child. No, no,
Well,
no,
you are a child. I'm a
no, no.
child
Yeah, yeah. We're all children of some point.
of someone.
But I want to ask you, like, because now I come from the side of Sturge Weber, so I have like kind of seizures. Like it's funny because I have two lights set up here, like different
Mhm.
sides to make the screen look better, letting a little bit in behind the scenes people. But I know if I stare directly at it for hours, which I used to do, as soon as this like conversation would be over, I would be upstairs going like, "Oh my god!" Like not with a migraine, but just knowing I basically effed myself for the
Yeah.
night because now I'm gonna have this whole right side goes numb.
Right.
It's not good. So now I try to keep them off
Yes.
to the sides.
Yes.
But I want to ask you just because I feel people will just be like, "Why did he ask those questions?" But that's essentially what we do. Is tell me a little bit about like growing up with a child with autism because I don't know a lot about autism. I'm more focused on my disability, but
Mhm.
there are people out there that do have children with autism,
Yeah.
grown children, children in general. But like, tell me how not difficult it could be, but like things that you kind of had to kind of sit back and be like, all right, how do I go about this? How do I make this a little bit more normal for this person?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that, because I think people people benefit sometimes people shy away from these questions.
We
And
don't shy away from anything.
we
If
don't
someone,
shy. We're right there,
yeah,
man.
yeah, if someone wants to
So
cancel me tomorrow, I'd be like, listen, I have a lawyer. She's also, she's
you gotta
also
pay
an,
a
yeah,
dollar.
yeah,
No, I
exactly, yeah.
Um, so yeah, my son, has a number of real challenges and disabilities that he, deals with. Um, one of which is similar to your own, and he's also, been received this diagnosis as a child that he was on the autistic spectrum, and
Okay,
he is largely he has extreme difficult speaking. So he uses over the years he learned to use an iPad. Thank goodness for technology has its great benefits, right? To communicate, and that's really provided a big window for him. But your question was more like as a parent, and I think most parents will tell you, raising a child is, hair raising as it is, incredibly joyful, but also you deal with a lot of struggles.
that's when we
When
play the Highway to Hell song.
Oh
No,
my
but yeah,
god,
yeah, yeah.
right? We all yes. So, but when you're dealing with a child who has severe medical issues, uh, you're a bit at a loss. No one necessarily plans for this.
Yeah.
And so, you have to find the resources and the people who will help. And I guess that's part of the story is that uh, I found in, not just medical professionals, but and there's a group of women that I'm very close to. We all have children with some kind of disability or challenge, and we have supported each other as our children have grown up. And those women were essential to my peace of mind, keeping a sense of humor, having a shoulder to cry on, uh, people who understood what was going on without my having to explain it. And they continue to be incredibly uh, supportive. As a matter of fact, two of them have a podcast called it's like Two Moms No Fluff, and you should check it out. Two incredible women who are talking about what it's like to raise children who have a disability, and how it is to kind of navigate the world that way. Any parent wants their child to find a way to express themselves, to have a sense of belonging and community
I love that. The doctor's chimes
and
in
the
like, what about
dog
me? What
chimes
about
in.
me? I have an opinion too here.
Thank you, Juno. That was Juno. Um, and so it it is very challenging, but anyone who has been in a caretaking position for someone they care and love understands. And guess what? Most of the world has, one way
Yeah.
or another. This is what connects us. So, I think there can be a tendency to feel like if you're not familiar with someone's particular issue, like, oh, I don't know how to handle that. It makes me uncomfortable. I always appreciated, for a while, I would go into, like when my son was much younger, I would go into the elementary schools and talk to classes about, I would just go in and say, well, let's talk about my son and, open up the questions, open up the floor for questions.
Yeah.
And kids are nothing if not,
Just
they will
cutthroat.
ask anything,
Yeah.
elementary, especially the younger ones.
Yeah.
And it was actually great because then you could give them honest answers,
Yeah.
open, honest answers, and give them the opportunity to be more comfortable and understand how they can be a more supportive person.
Yeah. I think I prefer like, with not to compare and contrast, but I think with any disability, I feel like it's just sometimes society can be like, hey, don't ask that, or you don't know how that person's going to take it. And I get that because they're not everyone's opened. I get it. But
Sure.
I think it's just, you know, if you want to stop having the closed door or the assumptions, just, I'm not saying like, oh, suck it up and talk about it. Like, obviously, it's totally up to you, but just ask. Like, what's the worst thing the person's going to say is actually, it's a sore subject. I don't want to talk about it. Like, that's fine, but at least you asked. Like, for me,
And
I would,
often, right,
yeah,
you might appreciate it, because it gives you an opportunity to just
yeah, I
talk
know.
about your experience.
If anything, it should try to make things a little bit more comfortable. Like, I can imagine. So
I
my
agree.
my scenario is like we play Mario Kart with my friends, and I hate Rainbow Road just because it's a shitty level to begin with. But it's like I now with the bumpers on. When I put the bumpers off, it's a lot
You're
worse.
looking for those bumpers,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. But like it's just again with Sturge Weber, it's the
Mhm.
whole epileptic side of things where you're looking at a road and then
It
I've
does
even
that
yeah, and I've
is
even
that, like,
told people
for you, that's what's
yeah,
can
like I tell people like when I used to play it on the Nintendo 64 when I was younger, it's on his TV, you're
yeah,
sitting there. It didn't affect me as much because we weren't as advanced with technology, we weren't as advanced of graphics and details.
yeah.
I can't play the Switch like this. Like if I'm playing, I can't because I'm motion, and then
Oh,
it's just too much. So I can play it on TV, no problem. It's just that the Rainbow Roads for me still cause that kind of like, all right, if I get sick later, I know why. But
yeah.
I will joke with my friends is like anything besides Rainbow Road, please. And then some of them are like just assholes and will choose Rainbow Road. And then I will laugh at it because I can play it, but I know the moment that because it hasn't happened yet, but if there's ever a moment where we go on a certain Rainbow Road, I will tell them, guys, I can't like I can't play this level
I'm out.
because and
Yeah.
then they'd understand it. It like I feel like if there's the one person that's like, well, I want to play it, I'd be like, all right, I'll finish eighth, but you're the monster here because you excluded me. But no,
I
like
like that.
I think it's interesting because like having those conversations with people, they get a kind of a sense of where you're coming from with it, that you can joke around with it. Like
Yeah.
we played the other night and they chose Rainbow Road. Now there's like five of us. So like the one person who chose it kind of felt like if it goes on Rainbow Road, all right, but the odds of it happening is like 20%. And
Yeah.
it didn't, but he was just kind of just being a little bit of a dick, I guess, and was like, well, if it lands on it, let's see if Brian will play it. And I'm like, oh, of course I'm gonna play it because it's not that bad. But there's still a side of me like, why are you a monster? Why? But I think it's just being
It
open.
provides a point of contact
Yeah.
actually,
And
right?
like
It
if
because
you're
then it's
open,
out in the open and
yeah,
it's not like, oh, no one wants to be, for example, stared at, right?
yeah,
A lot of the times when we go out, sometimes I will say I'm kind of sick and tired of being like a poster child for, like the family poster child, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get tired of that. But on the other hand, because people do sometimes stare and, whatnot, but you do have to be out in the world. It's
Yeah.
better to just be out there. And it makes it a lot easier when you've got friends and community that is understanding,
Yeah.
right? I've been around, people who, like my son, are not verbal communicators. And the lesson that I always learn is that there is so much more going on than one imagines. We all have our barriers. If you're accustomed to, speaking out loud, then you may not understand how much someone else is experiencing and how they're experiencing the world, which can be very complex and
Yeah.
very emotionally complex, you know, but you're only seeing it through your filter. And I think when you start to move, if you're aware of what your filter is and that there are other ways, there's sign language, there are, people type things out. Sometimes they're just looking at things you can see with their eyes, or, there are so many different ways people communicate, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And if you're open to communication, you will find a way to, if you're patient and you're open to communication, you'll find a way to respect someone who doesn't communicate the way that you do.
Like, how does he have his kind of own independence? Because I know, like, that's another thing that parents kind of worry about. Like, I know with
Yeah.
me, my parents, like, obviously I'm capable of doing plenty of things, but they just want to make sure, like, if something ever came up, we know, like, you know what to do, kind of thing. And I'm
Mhm.
like completely understood. But how does he kind of maintain having somewhat of an independence? Because it's autism. I know it's a kind of a disability in itself as well. But like, how does he maintain that? Because you did say, like, he plays video games, he does these
Mhm.
things. So how does he get to kind of still have his own little life, I guess, as well?
You know, um, he has relationships with other people, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's within a world of generally support.
Yeah.
And so I think, from a parent's perspective, but also just from the perspective of someone who values individual expression, uh, my husband and I, we try. I mean, we have 3 kids, right? With all of them, we want them to express themselves, find ways to feel independent in the world. Now, it depends on, it's always a balance,
Yeah.
right? It's like you have to balance the medical issues and the need to, make sure that someone is safe with a willingness to also let them go out and be in the world.
Yeah.
So, for my son, that means that he generally needs to have someone with him, a companion, to help him do things, right? Not everything, but many things. But you know, that's just one parameter, right? So it's like, if you use the analogy of, well, I need to wear glasses to read, right? What is the support that's going to enable this person
To be
to better
successful.
to
Yeah.
be successful, to
Yeah.
better express themselves? Like the iPad, right? When the iPad technology came out, and there was an app that was developed called Proloquo, which is a text to speech.
Okay.
That was huge because then my son was able to show other people that he knew how to read
Nice.
and
Okay.
write. It was really transformational for him in a lot of ways, even though his communication is still quite limited.
Limited. Yeah.
But still, that was a big difference. And of course, that's made a big difference for all kinds of people who struggle with, whether it's aphasia, whether there are other kinds of communication disorders. And technology has really gone a long way to providing people who have those kinds of communication challenges ways to communicate, demonstrate, you know, their inner thoughts. One of my favorite stories is my son one time took me outside. It was, it was just this sun had gone down, the moon had come up. He had his iPad and he wrote beautiful moon. There was nothing other in that statement than he wanted to share beauty with me. That's it. He just wanted to share that with me. So, it's all about communication.
Yeah. I feel like there's obviously there's challenges along the way, but it doesn't mean that they can't be successful or, do things in society. And I think that's kind of interesting in itself because it all depends on, I guess, the field you're interested in as well. Like I know for me with media, it's sometimes like if it's a blind disability, like, and not the blind disability, but I just mean like it's not there, people don't see it as much. It's kind of like, all right, like how do we go about asking him this? Like how do we go about without insulting him or like without trying to pinch a nerve? And I'm just like, I put it on a piece of paper. I have a disability. Like, do you think that I'm not willing to talk
Not
about
willing
it?
to talk about it.
Like if anything else, if I wasn't willing to talk about it, I wouldn't have put it down. Like, it's like if you go into I don't know, just say you're going into a dating scene or something and you don't want them to know you had 3 divorces. You don't put it down. It's simple. If you want to talk about your 3 divorces.
But you're being open about it. You're not, so that's, and I think that's huge. That's really valuable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, I think it's also a way to make it. Sometimes people have a tendency to elevate people with disabilities, like, oh, you're such an inspiration or whatever, and it's like, what, just let the person be a human being and live their life and recognize them and give them respect. And it doesn't have to be this question of turning them into something beyond what they are. They may very well be inspirational. That's great. But this is just a facet of who they are. I try and look at the world and say, look, like, first of all, most people I know, including my son, who have a disability that they have lived with, are really strong individuals, right? And my guess is that you probably are too. And because
I've been hitting the gym. No,
you have to put up with, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot you have to put up with. And so, it's not about treating people with kid gloves. It's just being a decent person. Just be interested in people.
That's how I feel when so it's interesting because when I send out stuff to PR and PR will either say, all right, this person's not available. How about this person? I'll be like, sure. Like I like having conversations. Like, there's an audience out there for everyone. Yeah. Right. But at the same point, sometimes I'm like, all right, you motherfucker. I was like, you just told me that he was doing no interviews. I just seen him on a late night show. But then that's just me being the person of I know I can do this. You have to give me a shot. And then they're just but you realize Jimmy Fallon, Conan, you. And I'm just yeah, but the reason that is because I'm not getting.
Hey, look, I'm psyched. I'm on Tobin tonight, man. Yeah. I mean, who am I? I'm over here making my music and doing whatever. I genuinely do, by the way. I appreciate the opportunity. And I was curious too. I watched your stuff and I'm like, that could be interesting.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Lily Vakili for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening, and good night.